Hello BookTube, this is my April 2026 manga wrap-up. Although given that there are 12 volumes in this wrap-up, this may very well degenerate into a wrap-up of doom, depending on how long it takes me to talk about these 12 volumes. So before I talk about the individual manga, let me talk real quick about how I acquire my manga. What I do is every month I put in a pre-order for the following month's forthcoming volumes of manga in the series I actively collect and debut volumes of series I would like to try out. I put in these pre-orders with Book People, the great bookstore in Austin, Texas. What Book People does is they will hold the volumes as they come in until the final volumes of my order arrives, at which point they will ship the completed order to me through the mail. Now, sometimes it usually takes the first week or so of the following month for them to come in. Sometimes it comes in a little bit earlier if the manga doesn't, like the final volumes, come in before the last week, and sometimes if Book People is busy, like their mail order department is swamped, it might take a few weeks before they are capable of shipping the order, as happened this month. So another thing I want to mention before I begin is that over the last few months, I have been losing interest in manga. If you've noticed from the amount of book hauls and what kind of book hauls I've been having, my interests have begun to, or have shifted elsewhere, although I am still picking up quite a bit of manga. So now let's get on to the volumes. I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I have them, that I read them in. That's determined by how I have them shelved in the little manga room. So now, let's get started. So first up is Ichi the Witch, Volume 2 by Osamu Nishi and Shiro Usazaki. So Ichi the Witch is about a feral teenager named Ichi, who lives by himself in a rural mountain, where he has developed a very keen sense of hunting. He's a very talented hunter. In this world, there are magical entities called magics that can be captured by women called witches who have a natural talent to utilize a magic's power for their own ends. And each magic has a specific trial that the witch has to complete in order to capture it. One day at the beginning of the series, Ichi encounters a magic called Ororo, whose trial is that he cannot be captured by a witch. And ultimately, Ichi does capture him, becoming the first male witch. This event is witnessed by the witch Discaras, who is one of the most prominent witches in the region. And Discaras takes Ichi under her wing to teach him how to be a witch. And he basically disregards her instructions in favor of his own natural hunting instincts. This volume continues a story arc that cliffhangered the first volume. Ichi, Discaras, and a witch sent along to record their exploits have come to a frozen village. A village frozen by a shark-like magic whose trial is for the witch who would capture her to make her look pretty. And Descaris and the other witch fail miserably at this. And Ichi, I guess, elicits some masochistic tendencies in this shark-like magic because he manages to win her trial. The second part of this volume sees Descaris' rival Tognis object to announcing to the world that there is a male witch and that he is a part of their association until he is more accomplished and presentable. So a bet is made in which Ichi and Tognis will go after the same magic. If Ichi wins, he will remain under Descaris' tutelage, who basically wants to let him figure out how to be a witch on his own and utilize his own native or his own inherent talents and strengths, while Tognis wants to send him to school and make him into a proper witch. However, the trial is interrupted by a magic who will seemingly become the main antagonist of the series. So, on the whole, I enjoyed this volume, even though I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first volume. I thought the Hisami magic arc, the first part, was really cool. Even if it was a bit silly. But then the second part where like the trial, the bed, and then the final antagonist showing up, I wasn't terribly too fond of that. So this is Tognis, and she has this weird gimmick of being terrible at directions. So yeah. So that was Ichi the Witch. So I liked it for the most part, although there are certain bits of the humor that I'm not so sure about. Ooh, this is definitely going to become the manga wrap-up of Doom. Okay, next up was Mission Yozakura Family Volume 22 by Hitsuji Gondaira. So Mission Yozakura Family is about a young man named Taiyo, whose family died before the series begins. He was comforted by his best friend Mutsumi Yozakura, who turns out to be the head of a family of super spies. In each generation of Yozakura, most of the siblings will be born with superhuman abilities, but one of them will be born mundane, and this individual will become the head of and progenitor of the next generation of Yozakura. So, in order to save Taiyo from her oldest brother Kyoichiro, who has not quite, but quite probably incestuous feelings towards his sister, Mutsumi and Taiyo marry, and he becomes part of the family. He becomes an accomplished spy on his own, and does eventually develop superpowers thanks to a blood transfusion from Mutsumi. So the family goes through a number of trials as a rogue member of the family and tries to use them for their own ends. This volume is part of basically the final arc. that takes place 5 years after the series begins, and sees, at least at this point, the protagonist position shifting to Taiyo and Mitsumi's twin children, Alpha and Hifumi. And they are incredibly accomplished little tykes at only 5 years old. This volume sees the twins going on a trip with Uncle Kyoichiro to find one of the last remaining siblings who have not returned. The youngest, Yozakura, Neneo, who is a very scientific-oriented young man. And so eventually they find where Neneo is and discover that he's basically forced to stay where he is because his colleague has betrayed him. And he doesn't want her to return to this lab. So the first part of this volume is basically a dungeon-esque adventure where Alpha and Hifumi must rescue their uncle Neneo. The last part of this volume is the last sibling to return. And in this case, he's getting married, and he doesn't want to. And so the Yozakura family must rescue him from this unwanted marriage. So one thing I enjoyed from this in this volume was some of Alpha and Hifumi's antics. They have some really interesting bits, particularly when they are pissed off. Let's see if I can. There's that. So a few things that I didn't particularly care for about this volume is that the family haven't really physically changed over 5 years. Particularly the members who were teenagers at the beginning of the series. Also, while Alpha and Hifumi are interesting characters, I would have rather the focus remained with Taiyo and Mitsumi. And I'm not entirely sure about this wedding arc that's coming up. Okay, so the third volume I read is the penultimate volume of Astro Royale, Volume 5, by Kin Wakui. So this is a series about the Yotsurugi family, who were Yakuza when a magical meteorite falls on Tokyo, granting some of the survivors superhuman abilities based on or imbued with by or a vital object. The main character is Hiburu Yotsurugi, who has a very romanticized, idealized, almost superheroic view of what it means to be Yakuza. Although much of the rest of his adopted siblings don't agree with him. This volume is a tournament arc. One of the siblings has come to possess a interesting bit of this meteorite, or of a different meteorite, and has set up a tournament to determine who gets it, supported by an association of more traditional Yakuza. Or although I guess in this case, there'd be more supervillain Yakuza. And so Hibaru and Tarasu, I think that's the... Yeah, Tarasu. Pretty much during this tournament. And so fight rival Yakuza members, even their own family. And it's a mess. It is rather a mess. So I think ultimately, while there might have been a good idea for Astro Royale, I don't think it was executed very well. The arcs kind of go by really quickly. The whole sort of superheroic vision of Yakuza just... And ultimately, I think I can see why it got canceled after 50 chapters. The 6th volume is the final volume. Although I don't know whether or not I'm going to pick it up because this volume didn't really do much for me. Although I've been saying that for like the last 2 or 3 volumes, so... So next up is Demons of the Shadow Realm, Volume 10 by Hiromu Arakawa. Arakawa is, of course, most famous for Full Metal Alchemist. Demons of the Shadow Realm take place in our world, although there are fantasy elements. In Higashi village, 2 twins are born, Yuru and Asa. Given the time that they were born, the twins possess the capability of developing superpowers called Break and Seal that the members of Higashi Village believe would give them the ability to take over the world. At the beginning of the series, the village is attacked by the Kagomori clan, and Yuru escapes with basically a broker who comes to the village to bring in modern medicines and stuff. And so he takes Yuru and 2 demons called Left and Right, whose job it is to guard the village. Yuru quickly discovers that the leader of the attack is his twin sister, who had escaped the village with their parents years before the series began. And so Yuru begins to try to figure out, okay, what's going on, who can I trust, and what exactly is it that I want. This volume sees a more solid turn for Yuru and his group toward the Kagamoris. While the Kagamoris were initially presented as antagonists, it has become pretty clear pretty quickly that of all of the factions, they're actually the best. They're the closest to being traditionally good. In earlier volumes, a third faction appeared called Nishino Village, who of the 3 are considerably the worst faction. And this volume sees an alliance between the outside Higashi Village, or basically Yuru's group, and the Kagamoris. And they return to Higashi Village to try to figure out what Nishino Village is, what they want. And oh boy, this volume, although very, very scant on the fighting, Yuru is put through an emotional ringer. And his response at the end is just the highlight of this volume. Just by the end of this volume, by the end of his return to Gashi Village, he has just had it with them. And that made this volume. Okay. Next is DanDaDan, Volume 18 by Yukinobu Tatsu. So this is a contemporary fantasy about two high schoolers, Momo and Ken, who goes by the nickname Okuran. Momo believes in the supernatural, not the extraterrestrial. Ken believes in the extraterrestrial, not the supernatural. So at the beginning of the series, they make a bet and discover that both the supernatural and the extraterrestrial exist in this world, and both are completely batshit insane. And during this, Momo's telekinetic abilities are awakened, and Ken is possessed and then gains on his own the abilities of a ghost called Turbo Granny, granting him super speed at the cost of his genitals. So, focus of the first part of the series is trying to get Okuran's genitals back. And he's gradually worked his way to where in this volume he finally, I think, he finally gets all of them back. And so Momo, Okuran, and an increasing cast of superpowered teenagers basically have all sorts of adventures with supernatural entities and extraterrestrial threats. So this volume is not quite the conclusion of an arc in which a number of people have been captured by a board game that initially Momo and this guy here, Zuma, had to clear. And eventually Zuma's friends and Okuran and Turbo Granny arrived. And so they beat the game and discovered that this game was actually a prison for a very powerful malevolent entity, the fairy tale card, who then possesses Zuma and forces him to fight his friends. And this is where Serpo, an alien, and a cop who is enter in. And then the final chapters of this volume are Zuma's backstory chapter, which is basically how he became a heroic juvenile delinquent. So I rather like this volume. I love the art of DanDaDan, and the action is just wonderful as well. I want to show you some of the fight with Okuran and Zuma. That was amazing. I think part of my issue with this arc, though, is that in one way it's gone a little too long. And another thing I had an issue with is how Okuran does not have access to his powers. Because, I mean, he should be empowered due to not having his family jewels. Whereas once he gets his family jewels back, he is in danger of losing them. But I don't know. Maybe I missed something during the previous volume as to why Okurin does not have his power. So that is just wow. Love the artwork on this series. Next is Gokurakugai, Volume 5 by Yuto Sano. So this is the story of a district that in an unnamed city that has Chinese and Japanese characteristics, and is about two individuals, Alma and Teo. Alma is a type of humanoid monster called a maga that are created from corpses. Most maga do not look human, but some do. And so before the series begins, some method was discovered to keep Alma in check. And so he works with a normal human named Tao, they both work as effectively troubleshooters, private eyes, whatever you need, they do it. Although, as a side gig, they also hunt down maga and stuff. So this volume sees Alma facing a humanoid maga named Utsu, who has been preying on the young men of Gokurakugai. And Utsu is captured and interrogated, and they learn that one individual, Yami, is creating the maga, most of which turn into more monstrous entities, but some remain humanoid, and he basically adds them to his family. The latter part of this volume sees Alma and Teo and a colleague, Nei, going to Haunted Mansion, which is a base for another humanoid maga that Nei has some business with when the maga was still alive. I have been on the verge of dropping this series for a few volumes now. It is not a regular release because its chapter count is about the same as a weekly manga series, even though this is a monthly series. So volume releases are periodic. I mean, I like the artwork, but the series itself just isn't really doing anything for me outside of the art. So I do think this will probably one of the series that I drop. Okay. Next is Phantom Busters Volume 3 by Neoshoco. So this is a series about a group of high school boys who form an occult club, the Phantom Busters. At the beginning of the series, a young man named Eugene Korekishi meets Mogare. Mogare is an exorcist who disposes of ghosts by eating them. However, he lacks the ability to see or communicate with ghosts, which is where Zaki, who can see ghosts and attract ghosts, and I am blinking on his name. Tamon, who can communicate with ghosts, come in. By these three coming together, they can basically see and communicate with ghosts. And Mogari can then eat them. Korekishi, however, is completely mundane. So they basically have all sorts of really zany adventures as high school students who also exercise ghosts. This volume begins with the group going to a karaoke bar and exercising a ghost there. And there's a lot of, and the main point of this, that chapter was to make a play on popping one's cherry. Although in this case, karaoke and not having sex. The next chapter is about the group trying to find a missing cat that is not necessarily a normal cat. And then the third and fourth chapters of this volume focus on Zaki, who does not have the best relationship with his family, and ultimately the rest of the group decide to figure out what's going on with him and try to help him, which they successfully do by destroying the corrupted spirit of a prostitute. So I have a very mixed thoughts about this volume. I mean, I like the series a lot, but some of the humor I'm not too sure about. So, yeah. Okay. Next up is Gachiakuta, Volume 10 by Kei Urana. So this is the story of a young man named Rudo who was raised on a place called the Sphere. At the beginning of the series, he is exiled from the Sphere and dropped to the ground. While there, he meets a young man named Injin and discovers that he has the abilities of a giver. He can imbue a vital instrument and use it for magical effects. Now, Rudo is a bit more special because he can basically use a whole lot of stuff as vital instruments. And so he joins an organization called the Cleaners on the understanding that they will help him find a way back to the Sphere so he can enact bloody revenge. However, during this story arc, he is approached by an organization of raiders with the same proposal, that they will help him go to the Sphere to enact bloody revenge. However, by this point, Rudo, while he would like revenge, I think his revenge is more living his best life with his newfound friends. And so this volume begins with him and his team trying to escape a trash beast that is traveling to the border between the ground and the Sphere. And then the middle part of the volume deals with some character development for Rudo as he tries to figure out how to be a friend. And then the third part is sort of emphasizing that goal as Rudo and the younger members of the Cleaners go to a nearby town to take the magical artist home. I love the artwork in this series. It is just spectacular. And I am really loving the story has been consistently good throughout the run. And I really love all of the character development. It is just, this has been one of my favorite manga series since it came out. And it is still really, really good. Moving on to Zom 100 by Volume 19 by Hiro and Kotaro Takata. This is a zombie apocalypse series about a wage slave named Akira, who basically is a real-life zombie. At the beginning of the series, there is a zombie apocalypse, and Akira and his best friend Kensho decide to travel Japan and work on a bucket list of 100 things they would like to do before they turn into a zombie. So they have, over the course of the series, gathered a small group of traveling companions, and they go on crazy adventures. This volume begins with a three-chapter arc where Akira wants to go ride an ostrich. So they go to a zoo where they meet the only human there, who was a zookeeper, who has basically gone back to nature and hates humans. And so they help her out, and then they go ride ostriches, and then they lead the ostriches to a medical facility that they'd visited in an earlier arc to help the researcher there develop a vaccine for the zombification, or it would be a vaccine. And then they reconnect with some people that they'd met on a cruise ship. I have to admit that the last few volumes of Zom 100 haven't really done much for me. A lot of the dramatic tension, I think, has really fallen off as Akira and Shizuku's relationship has been settled. Which I guess is always the danger of settling a romantic storyline too soon. Although Hiro does a very good job of kind of building it, which you don't always see in manga. Oh. Yeah, this was hilarious, bizarre. So, I don't quite know what I want to do with Zom 100. Okay, the final three. Record of Ragnarok, Volume 18 by Azychika on art, Shinya Umemura on, I'm assuming, the story outline, and Takumi Fukui on the actual script. So Record of Ragnarok is a fighting manga in which the gods have decided to eradicate humanity, and the Valkyrie Brunhilde objects and invokes Ragnarok, which is a contest between 13 champions of humanity and 13 champions of the gods to fight to the death, with the majority of matches determining humanity's fate. This volume is a continuation of the fight between Nikola Tesla of the Einherjar, the champions of humanity, against Beelzebub, who is representing the gods. both characters are very science oriented. And so most of this fight is really with Tesla taking sort of the initiative in the fight. The earlier volume, volume 17, was more Beelzebub. Although Beelzebub is more the central focus of the arc compared to Tesla. Tesla's backstory is told here, but overall in the arc, Beelzebub gets more focus. So how Record of Ragnarok works is you'll have some sort of prep work for the fight, and then the fighters arrive. One of the fighters will get the most focus, and then the other fighter will get a little bit less, and then they'll fight. One of them will take the initiative, and then the other one will make a comeback for a little bit, and then there might be a few back and forths until one of them ultimately overpowers the other with a deciding move. So I think what really drew me to Record of Ragnarok is the art. The art is amazing. But to be honest, after so many fights, the series has gotten a little repetitive. So I don't quite know what I want to do with it. But I must say, I really love the character design of Beelzebub. Muscular goth boy. Anyway, next up is The Summer Hikaru Died, Volume 7 by Moku Mokurin. So this is a contemporary horror story set in a remote area of Japan, a year after a young man named Hikaru disappeared for a week in the nearby forests. However, what returned was not Hikaru. It was some sort of eldritch abomination that has possessed Hikaru's body. And the only person who knows this is Hikaru's best friend, Yoshiki. And so at the beginning of the series, Yoshiki and this new Hikaru have a sort of a strange reacquaintance with each other. Hikaru does not know whether he should kill Yoshiki or not. Yoshiki is not sure what he wants to do, and so gradually the two work it out into a new friendship between the two. All the while, an investigator, the cover model, comes to town to investigate a spate of impurities. Basically, the location is becoming more haunted. More magical or supernatural beings are appearing. Things are going to hell in a handbasket. This volume sees the group or groups come together to try to at least close the door on some of the impurities. The cover model, Takata, I think that's his name. Oh, no, Tanaka. And a friend of Yoshiki and Hikaru's go to try to close a smaller hole in reality, while Yoshiki and Hikaru go to a much larger one to close it. And the volume ends with a victory, but also a defeat. And one of the things that I really liked about the series, what drew me to the series, is that Yoshiki is in love with Hikaru. Both the original Hikaru, who was straight, and this new Hikaru who doesn't really understand what's going on. And so the initial part of the earlier volumes was them coming to terms with what their relationship was going to be. And so that kind of continues on, although has in more recent volumes been pushed back. Now here's a cover. So this volume has 5 chapters and a very quick read. So this is Hikaru. This is Yoshiki. And it's really, really good horror novel series. Very reminiscent of Stranger Things, of course. So yeah. And then the final thing I read was Bug Ego Volume 1 by ONE on story and Kiyoto Shitara on art. So this is the story of 2 high school friends, Hitsuji and Kokudo. Kokudo, at the beginning of the series, discovers a way to hack reality. And the two sort of go through sort of ways to hack reality and get into trouble. I have to say that I did not like this at all. The series did not work for me. The art is kind of interesting. This is Kokudo, so he is the cover model. And then Hitsuji is this guy here. So it's just... didn't really get on with it. It didn't connect with me. So, yeah. So I won't be continuing on with this for sure. And then over the following months, I'll figure out what to do with which series I want to continue with and which ones I don't. Because, again, like I said earlier, I am losing interest in manga. So, we'll see. I will, of course, report back. This video has gone on way too long. I need to go get me a drink. And I will see you next week with more videos. So until then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great rest of your evening and have a great weekend.